Getting inspiration to create a horror game is not as hard as many people think, and it does not require a wild imagination that can compose a scary fictional world. As a matter of fact, the real world is enough to inspire developers to make the most unsettling horror titles possible without having to add anything from their minds. Because even though we consider the frightening stories in games and movies as something exaggerated and impossible to be real, reality can actually be way worse and more horrifying than the made-up scenarios of the entertainment industry. Many horror games draw inspiration from real-life circumstances, urban legends, and folklore to create a sense of realism and immersion for players. By implementing real-life stories, horror game developers can tap into the deep-seated fears and anxieties that exist in our world and create a heightened sense of terror and suspense that can leave a unique impact on us. Through the last few years, many of the games that were released were actually influenced by true events and actual locations. One of the famous examples is Outlast, which takes place in an abandoned psychiatric hospital called Mount Massive Asylum. But what most of you don't know is that the story was actually inspired by a real-life asylum in Pennsylvania called the Pennhurst Complex, and also by experiments conducted at multiple psychiatric hospitals in the mid-20th century, such as the infamous Tuskegee syphilis study. Another example is Colette, which was inspired by the Dyatlov Pass incident, where 9 hikers disappeared and died mysteriously in the northern Ural Mountains of Russia in 1959. Drawing inspiration from real-life incidents can add an extra layer of terror and realism to a horror game. However, developers must carefully handle these real-life occurrences and stories with sensitivity and respect. According to the channel's email inbox, there are actually a decent number of indie developers watching our videos, and that's why I decided to make this video. I want to talk about a few real-life places and locations that are actually haunted and known for their paranormal activities and dark histories. Not only because I'm fascinated by their stories and curious about their secrets, but also because I would definitely be thrilled to see them represented in a form of horror gaming, where we can feel and live the real dread they can cause, and not just read articles about them or watch documentaries that are just meant to tease us. So please be ready, because the 5 sites that we're going to talk about today can definitely give you some bad dreams and frightful nights. POVEGLIA Island, situated in the northern region of Italy between Venice and Lido, has gained notoriety for being one of the world's scariest places. The island has been closed to everyone, including locals and tourists, due to its haunted reputation. During the outbreak of the bubonic plague in 1348, which resulted in the death of 1/3 of Europeans, POVEGLIA Island, like many other small islands, was turned into an isolated colony where many infected people were exiled. The sick and dying were burned on huge pyres, including tens of thousands of Venice citizens who lost their lives on the mainland. A large number of individuals who were unwell and close to death were brought to this location and abandoned, leading to their eventual demise. It was clear that there was no chance of recovery from this site, and it appears that those who were sent here were fully cognizant of the fact that they would only suffer a painful death. If you think this is shocking, then obviously you don't know the rest of this place's history. Because the events that took place on POVEGLIA Island in the 1800s and early 1900s were even worse than what you may have heard. During that time, the island was transformed into a mental asylum called the POVEGLIA Asylum, but it was notorious for its lack of rehabilitation. The doctor in charge of the institution conducted strange and disturbing experiments on the patients, which resulted in numerous fatalities and irreversible harm. The doctor eventually went insane and died mysteriously in the 1930s, leaving behind the tortured spirits of those who died from the bubonic plague and the asylum, as well as his own ghost. Despite attempts by the Venetian government to redevelop the island, its dark past has made it impossible for any work to take place, and the location remains permanently closed. Now, I want you to activate your imagination and imagine a horror game that takes place on this cursed island, where you need to deal with the aftermath of all the dark events that happened there through the centuries. Or imagine if you take on the role of a character who finds themselves there and can't call for help, and all they can do is try to survive the psychological impact of the place's eerie background. I really hope that some developer will be inspired by this and make the experience possible, especially since it will not be the first chilling Italian place to be featured in a horror game. It happened before with the Town of Light, where the story centers around the infamous Volterra Asylum, which was a nightmare for thousands of patients who could never get out of it. If you're interested in its history, you can watch my previous video where I showcased the Town of Light, and you'll realize how messed up it was. This abandoned sanatorium, located in Louisville, Kentucky, has a reputation for being one of the most haunted places in the United States. The Waverly Hills Institution was originally built in 1910 as a tuberculosis hospital to treat patients with the deadly disease. However, over the years, it became known for its experimental treatments, horrifying conditions, and high death rates. And by high, I mean thousands of people lost their lives in a hospital that could hold 400 patients at once, so you can understand how bad the situation was. There have been numerous reports of paranormal activity at Waverly Hills, including ghostly apparitions, disembodied voices, strange sounds, and unexplained movements. Some of the most commonly reported sightings include a ghostly figure known as the Death Nurse, as well as the spirits of former patients and staff members. According to reports, the most popular ghost associated with the property belongs to a nurse who was working at the hospital during the height of the tuberculosis epidemic. Her job was to take care of the patients, and she was known for being strict and unsympathetic. Some patients even claimed that she was responsible for many deaths because of her harsh treatment. One day, the nurse was found dead in a peculiar position in one of the hospital's rooms. It's not clear whether it was an accident or she was murdered, but some believe that her spirit never left the place. Individuals who visited Waverly Hills have reported seeing the ghostly figure of a nurse wearing an old-fashioned uniform. She is often described as being harsh and unsmiling, just like the nurse from the story. Some have even reported feeling a cold breath on their necks or a strange presence in the room when the nurse's apparition appears. The room is known by the number 502, and it's considered the eeriest part of the whole building. There have been numerous investigations by paranormal experts and ghost hunters over the years, many of which have yielded compelling evidence of supernatural activity. Waverly Hills has also been featured on numerous television shows and documentaries about the paranormal, further adding to its reputation as a haunted hotspot. While there is no concrete evidence to prove that the location is actually haunted, the sheer volume of reports and experiences from visitors and investigators alike suggests that there may be something unusual and unexplainable happening there. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, a visit to Waverly Hills Sanatorium is sure to be a spine-tingling and unforgettable experience. In one of my previous videos, I mentioned that I have two favorite settings for horror games, and I also said that they make me uncomfortable even in real life. The two places I'm talking about are hotels and definitely hospitals. No matter how they look fancy or luxurious, nothing can make me forget the dark side of the stuff happening inside them. Because, as I said before, even though hotels seem like nice buildings to spend some nights or even enjoy their services, they remain similar to public houses, where all kinds of people come and go. And this can include mysterious individuals that can do unbearable stuff during their stay. And on the other side, hospitals are definitely a necessary service for all of us, regardless of whether we like them or not. But this also can hide the fact that many sinister things happened there, like evil experiments on patients and using them as test subjects for different drugs and treatments. If you do a little research on the psychiatric hospitals that operated in the last 200 years, you'll find out that they were basically the definition of a horror movie. People there were pretty much facing all kinds of mistreatment, and they didn't even have the chance to leave after going inside. So you can imagine how haunted hospitals can be when you think about the pain that happened behind their walls through the years. That's why I think Waverly Hills would be a suitable setting for a horror game that portrays its dark past, the spirit of the mysterious nurse, and the ghosts of the innocent patients who died there. That's definitely an experience that horror fans would be thrilled to get their hands on. Raynham Hall, an exquisite country house in Norfolk, has been owned by the Townsend family for over 400 years and is famously known for the sighting of the Brown Lady ghost. The Brown Lady is believed to be Lady Dorothy, the wife of Turnip Townsend and sister of Prime Minister Robert Walpole, who was allegedly imprisoned in the hall by her husband, leading to her ghostly presence on the staircase. The Brown Lady's picture, taken in the 1930s, is considered one of the most famous ghost photographs worldwide, but some skeptics have called it a fake, suggesting it was created through double exposure, or the combination of two images to form the figure of a spirit descending the stairs. Despite the controversy, the photo is still revered among ghost enthusiasts, and seen as credible by the general public as well, especially since it was taken at a time when photo manipulation and special effects were not common as today. Despite numerous reports of Lady Dorothy's abuse and ill treatment by her husband, papers discovered in the 1960s state otherwise. These documents indicate that she lived a happy and fulfilling life, but this argument was never confirmed. There is also a story that suggests Dorothy was deceived by the Countess of Wharton, who discovered that Dorothy was having an affair with her husband Thomas Wharton. Subsequently, the Countess invited her to stay over for a few days so she could set her up and punish her, knowing that her husband would not let her leave the house alone. Regardless of the truth, the outcome was the same. Dorothy was locked inside her home until her death in 1726 due to smallpox. Although she was buried that year, some believe that her funeral was a sham and that her husband Turnip locked her up. Regardless of whether she was mistreated by her spouse or was trapped by the Countess, the common theme here is Dorothy went through sad and tragic events. She lived in pain despite the luxurious setting around her, and apparently, no one was there to help her or even acknowledge her misery. But the most disturbing part is that her ghost is not the only one in the abode. Other spirits are said to haunt the hall, including the Duke of Monmouth, a caretaker with his cocker spaniel, and two ghostly children. This is not shocking because the old house has a long history of anguish and distress, and many people believe that it is still inhabited by unhappy spirits. This is why I believe that the place can be an amazing environment for a horror game that centers around the mysterious past of the location and the creepy ghosts of the people who once were suffering inside it. The Island of the Dolls is closely linked to Don Julian Santana Barrera's story, which highlights weird and frightening events. Santana Barrera, a resident of Xochimilco in Mexico City, left his wife and kids in the mid-1900s and moved to an island in Tachuelo Lake. Although the reasons for his decision are unclear, it became apparent that Barrera was experiencing mental instability. Soon after relocating, he discovered the body of a young girl who had drowned in the lake on the island's shores. This grim incident was followed by the appearance of a doll floating through the canals, which had a profound impact on Barrera's life and the island's appearance for many years, and even to this day. Barrera, who was alone on the empty island, hung a doll from a tree to calm the spirit of the dead girl. However, he felt that one doll was insufficient to appease her, so he spent the next 5 decades collecting dolls from dumpsters and canals and hanging them on trees in various states. Some whole, some headless, torsoless, or dismantled. This behavior was not rational, and there are doubts about the legend, especially regarding the existence of the deceased girl. Barrera's family also doubted that he ever found her, and it is unclear whether he made up the story, imagined it, or was mistaken. Nonetheless, he dedicated his life to the girl, whether she was real or not. And apparently, the story of the drowned child had significant connections to the end of his life too, which was possibly the most unsettling aspect. Santana Barrera died in 2001. His body was found drowned in the canal, at the very spot where he had claimed to have seen the little girl. This incident attracted tourists to the island who started visiting to pay homage. People hang dolls as a tribute in memory of Barrera and the girl, whose existence is not confirmed. What's your opinion on this? Do you believe that the young girl is real and Barrera actually saw her, or do you think that it was all in his imagination and a result of his mental state? To be honest, it doesn't actually matter if she was real or not. The whole story is still terrifying due to the events that happened, and we can confirm with our own eyes. We're literally talking about a whole island covered with mysterious dolls, and as a horror fan, I know that dolls are among the creepiest elements in horror projects. So I would definitely appreciate it if this island becomes the environment of a horror game. Thinking about the idea alone makes me thrilled. The Winchester Mystery House is a mansion located in California that is famous for its strange design and also its supposed hauntings. The mansion was originally owned by Sarah Winchester, the widow of William Winchester, who was Oliver Winchester's son, the famous businessman and the founder of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. After William's death in 1881, Sarah inherited a large fortune and began to obsess over the idea that she was cursed by the ghosts of all the people who had been killed by Winchester rifles. According to the story, she sought the advice of a sorcerer, who told her that the only way to appease the spirits was to continuously build a house for them until the last day of her life. Sarah started building the mansion in 1884 and continued expanding it for more than 3 decades until her death in 1922. It is said that she never stopped building, with construction taking place 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, until she died. During this time, she added many elements to the abode with no clear plan or purpose. As a result, the house became an architectural oddity, just like a maze, with staircases that lead nowhere, doors that open onto walls, and windows that overlook other rooms. There are also secret passageways and chambers within other chambers. In other words, it's a complete mess, but somehow it's a piece of art too. It has 160 rooms, including 40 bedrooms, 13 bathrooms, 2 ballrooms, 17 chimneys, 47 fireplaces, and over 10,000 windows. But the most frightening part of the whole place is definitely the seance room. It is located on the upper floor of the mansion, and is a small room with walls covered in red fabric and no windows. It has a single door that can only be opened from the outside, and rumors say that Sarah Winchester used this chamber to communicate with the spirits she believed were haunting her. Many people claim they experienced weird phenomena in the room, such as feeling a cold breeze, hearing unexplained noises, and feeling a presence that cannot be seen. In fact, some paranormal investigators believe that the seance room is a portal to the spirit world, and that Sarah Winchester utilized it to communicate with the dead. Legend has it that Sarah Winchester was so fearful of the spirits that she slept in a different bedroom each night and never stayed in the same room twice. It is also worth noting that the death of her daughter made her even more obsessed, and confirmed that the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles were haunting her family. To this day, we can't make sure if Sarah was actually targeted by paranormal activities and entities, or if she was just experiencing hallucinations due to her guilt over the business of her husband. The only thing that we can confirm is that visitors to the place have agreed that there's something strange about it, and it's not hard to feel that there are unusual occurrences happening inside its eerie rooms, despite the beautiful architectural appearance. I don't know why this place hasn't featured in a horror game to this day. It literally looks like the perfect setting for a terrifying experience that can stick in our minds and give us some bad dreams for a while. But the most fascinating thing would be the suspense and the questions that we will be looking for answers to. Like how Sarah actually lived during the years of building the house, and who's the mysterious sorcerer that gave her the idea of constructing it in the first place. Just think about it with me. What if we had a horror game that centers around the story of this mansion, and at the same time has visuals close to a game like Madison? It would definitely belong on my wish list. These are the 5 haunted places that I wanted to feature in today's video, and trust me, they're just the tip of the iceberg. Because if I keep talking about all the frightening locations that exist in real life, the video will be hours and hours long, and probably your hearts won't even bear it. But if you enjoyed this list, then make sure to give it a like, and I'll definitely make a part 2 very soon. Until then, stay safe, and don't let fear take over your minds.